What if the people you love the most were taken from you, and the law said you couldn't do a damn thing about it? It was quiet in the courtroom. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, just pressure. My hands were clenched around the edge of the defendant's table, my knuckles pale. The judge glanced down at a thick manila folder, flipping slowly through pages, as if the seconds he took weren't tightening a noose around my chest. Laura sat across from me, her lawyer smug and calm, like this was already done. Like I'd already lost. I glanced over to the corner of the room, where Aiden and Lily sat with a court-appointed counselor. They didn't look at me. That hit harder than anything the judge could say. Aiden had his arms crossed. Lily picked nervously at her dress. This wasn't supposed to be my life. 2 years ago, we were eating pancakes on Saturday mornings, dancing to 80s music in the kitchen, and building couch forts on rainy afternoons. Now, I was a man fighting for permission to tuck his kids in at night. Mr. Harris, the judge said, finally lifting his gaze, before I issue my ruling, is there anything else you'd like to say? I stood. I didn't have a speech. I had no prepared statement. Just a broken heart and a raw throat. I looked at my kids. Your Honor, I began, my voice rough. This isn't about me winning or Laura losing. It's about Aiden and Lily. About making sure they grow up feeling safe, loved, and whole. I know the papers say a lot of things, but none of them tell you what it's like when your 8-year-old daughter cries herself to sleep because she doesn't understand why Daddy doesn't come home anymore. Or how your son stops talking to you because he thinks it'll make things easier. I paused, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. I'm not perfect. God knows I've made mistakes. But I've never stopped showing up. I've never stopped being their father. And I won't. Even if this court says I can't see them, I'll still be here. Every day. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Then, something happened. Aiden stood up. Everyone turned. He walked straight to the bench and handed the judge a folded piece of paper. Aiden, the counselor whispered, trying to pull him back. But he didn't flinch. This is for the judge, he said, voice steady but small. It's important. The judge took the letter slowly, with raised eyebrows. Is this something you wrote? Aiden nodded. I didn't even know he'd been writing anything. My heart was hammering. Laura's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, I object to unsanctioned communications. But the judge held up a hand. Sit down, Mr. Randall. He unfolded the letter. Read in silence. The room was still again, but this time, the silence pulsed with tension. The judge's eyes flicked back and forth across the page. Then, his brow furrowed. When he finished, he looked up at Aiden. Would you like me to read this out loud? Aiden nodded again. I could barely breathe. And, just like that, everything in the room shifted. But before I take you further, before I tell you what was in that letter, or how it turned a courtroom upside down, you need to know the full story. How a father like me ended up here. How love turned into loss. How a marriage unraveled, and how the fight for 2 little hearts nearly broke us all. So before that gavel drops, let's go back to the beginning. Because this story might just spark a new beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the courtrooms. Before the accusations and custody battles. Before my son handed a folded letter to a judge and changed everything, I was just a dad. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 42. Born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. I'm the kind of guy you walk past in the grocery store and don't think twice about. I wear jeans to church, I make pretty good chili, and I cry during Disney movies, though I'll never admit that to Aiden. For most of my adult life, I was an electrical engineer for a manufacturing company. It was solid work. The kind where you clock in, solve other people's problems, and head home just in time to kiss your kids goodnight. I never dreamed of corner offices or palm trees. I just wanted a warm house, a worn-out recliner, and the sound of my kids laughing in the background. That was my idea of paradise. And for a while, I had it. Laura and I met in college. She was majoring in English literature and could quote Sylvia Plath at any moment, which honestly intimidated the hell out of me. She had this spark in her eyes when she talked about things she loved: old poetry, jazz music, the idea of raising a family in a big yellow house with a tire swing out back. I fell hard and fast. We married young. Maybe too young. But those first few years felt like we were building something unbreakable. We bought a small fixer-upper on the edge of town and turned it into a home. On weekends, we painted the walls, planted a garden, and dreamed up baby names. When Aiden was born, I swear something inside me rewired. I looked down at this tiny human, wrapped up like a burrito, and thought, this is it. This is what I was made for. 2 years later, Lily arrived, red-faced and screaming like she was ready to take on the world. Laura held her and cried. I did too. We were parents of 2 now, exhausted and overwhelmed, but still somehow managing to laugh at 3 a.m. diaper explosions and preschool art disasters. I won't pretend everything was perfect. It wasn't. There were money problems, career stress, sleep deprivation, and the usual arguments over who left the dishes in the sink or whether we should let the kids have iPads. But back then, even the fighting felt like something we could get through. Because we loved each other. And more importantly, we loved our kids. But life has a way of testing things slowly, then all at once. When the kids were still young, I got a promotion that doubled my hours. Suddenly I was staying late, working weekends, answering emails at the dinner table. I told myself it was temporary, that I was doing it for the family. But looking back now, I see the damage it did. Laura started feeling like a single parent. I missed piano recitals and school lunches. The moments I used to live for slowly faded into background noise. And the thing is, I thought we were okay. I thought Laura understood. I was wrong. One night, after putting Lily to bed, I walked into the kitchen and found her staring at a glass of wine like it was the last anchor holding her down. She looked up and said quietly, I don't know if I love you anymore, Dan. I laughed at first. Thought she was joking. But her face stayed stone still. That was the night something cracked inside us. We tried therapy. 3 sessions. She quit. Said it was just putting band-aids on a bullet hole. The months that followed were filled with slammed doors, cold silences, and the kind of emotional distance you can feel across the dinner table. Then came the day she asked me to move out. I packed a duffel bag with just enough for the week. A week turned into a month. A month turned into a lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes away. The kids split time, at first. I kept the house stocked with snacks they liked. Put glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Told myself it was still a home. But I could see it in their eyes. Confusion. Fear. That aching question no child should ever have to ask. Was this my fault? Aiden stopped talking as much. He buried himself in video games. When I'd ask how he was, he'd shrug and say, fine. Lily still jumped into my arms, but sometimes she'd cry when I had to take her back to their moms. She didn't understand why Daddy couldn't stay for bedtime stories anymore. Laura's bitterness grew. She accused me of being selfish, of prioritizing work over family. Maybe she wasn't wrong. But the things she said, how she said them, cut deeper than I could admit. She didn't want shared custody. She wanted full custody. Said the kids needed stability. And suddenly, I was no longer just an ex-husband. I was the opposition. The next few months blurred into court dates, paperwork, affidavits, and tense exchanges in parking lots. I watched as the woman I once loved became a stranger, holding my kids' hands while looking at me like I was a threat. I wasn't a perfect man, but I was a damn good father. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I couldn't let them be pulled away from me. Not without a fight. People think marriages end with shouting, cheating, or some explosive betrayal. Sometimes they do. But in my case, it ended with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow, soul-numbing kind that creeps in between conversations and swallows everything you used to feel. I started noticing the cracks after I took that promotion. At first, it seemed like a blessing. More money, more security. I thought I was doing what a good husband does, providing. Building the life we dreamed about when we were broke college kids eating frozen pizza on the floor of our first apartment. But life changed, and I didn't see how fast it was slipping away from me. I was getting home later each week. 10-hour days turned into 12. I missed Aiden's soccer practice, then his first goal. Laura sent a picture, but it wasn't the same. Then came Lily's kindergarten play. She was a daffodil, her favorite flower. I promised I'd be there. Got stuck on a conference call instead. I told myself I'd make it up to her. She didn't ask me to. She just stopped talking about school plays after that. Laura began handling more on her own. Groceries, homework, dentist appointments, bedtime routines. I could feel her frustration in the little things. Shorter answers, colder hugs, eyes that didn't meet mine when I came through the door. Still, I convinced myself this was just a phase. Every couple has one, right? But phases don't usually end with separate bedrooms. It happened gradually. She started falling asleep with the kids more often. I worked late even when I didn't need to. We passed each other in the hallway like roommates with schedules that didn't quite align. No fights. No slammed doors. Just distance. One night, I came home to find her in the kitchen, pacing with her phone in one hand and a wine glass in the other. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. When she saw me, she didn't even say hi. Just turned away and kept talking. Yeah, I'll have to reschedule. Dan's finally home, she said, with a bitter laugh, like my presence was inconvenient. That stung. We fought that night. A long, messy, whisper-yell kind of fight where we didn't want to wake the kids, but we wanted to hurt each other anyway. You're never here, she hissed. I'm here every night. Physically, not emotionally. I remember standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by toys and unfolded laundry, and wondering how the hell we got so lost. You act like I chose this, I said. Like I enjoy coming home to tension and walking on eggshells. She stared at me for a second, then walked away. After that, things didn't get better. They just got quieter. I started sleeping on the couch more. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just until we cooled off. But weeks passed, then months. Eventually, she stopped wearing her wedding ring. I noticed it sitting on the bathroom counter one morning, like it had given up trying to be part of her life. Still, we held on for the kids, for the routine, for the fear of starting over. But the truth? We were already gone. I think Aiden sensed it before we admitted it out loud. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. He started retreating. When I'd ask how school was, I'd get one-word answers. He'd come home, drop his backpack, and disappear into his room. I tried connecting, inviting him to build Legos or watch a movie. Sometimes he said yes, but most times, he just looked tired. Tired of pretending everything was okay. Lily was still young enough to believe everything could be fixed with hugs and ice cream. She'd crawl into my lap and say things like, "When you and Mommy stop being mad, can we all go to the zoo again?" I'd kiss her forehead and say, "Of course, sweetheart," but my voice felt like a lie. Then came the dinner that broke us. It was a Friday. I got home early for once. Picked up Lily's favorite takeout. I thought it would be a surprise, a peace offering. I walked into the kitchen, smiling for the first time in days. Laura was on her laptop. Aiden was on his tablet. Lily was coloring. No one looked up. "Got your favorite," I said. Laura didn't respond. I set the bags down and tried again. "Orange chicken for Lily, sweet and sour for Aiden, and egg rolls for you." Nothing. Finally, she looked up. "Dan, can we talk later?" My stomach dropped. We sat down that night after the kids were asleep. The house was too quiet. She didn't beat around the bush. I want a separation. Those 4 words didn't hit me like a bomb. They hit me like a whisper that confirmed everything I already feared. I didn't argue. What could I say? "We can fix this" felt like a joke by then. I moved out the following week. It was early November. The trees had turned, and the air was cold enough to remind you winter was coming. I loaded what I could into the back of my truck: clothes, toothbrush, old photographs, and drove to a furnished apartment that smelled like lemon cleaner and loneliness. I didn't cry that night, but I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how I let it get this far. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that the real storm hadn't even started yet. That came next. The word divorce looks sterile on paper. Just a checkbox on a form. A life transition. Something you might whisper about in church pews or discuss with coworkers in hushed tones over lunch. But living it? Divorce is messy. Raw. It's waking up in the middle of the night reaching for someone who isn't there and remembering why. Laura filed first. She didn't say anything when she dropped the envelope at my door. It came in a plain manila folder, like it was just business. Just paperwork. Inside was a summons, a timeline, and a list of terms that didn't feel like negotiation. They felt like punishment. She wanted full legal and physical custody of the kids. Not joint. Not shared. Full. I read the line 3 times, thinking I'd misunderstood. But there it was, in black ink. Mother requests full custody of both minor children due to father's inconsistent availability and emotionally unstable behavior. Emotionally unstable? That one burned. Sure, I'd raised my voice a few times during fights. Who doesn't? But I was never violent. Never threatening. Never cruel. I didn't drink. I didn't disappear. I showed up, even when it was hard. But that didn't seem to matter now. She'd hired a sharp, aggressive lawyer named Randall Cole, a guy with slicked back hair, expensive shoes, and a reputation for going for the jugular. He didn't just question my parenting, he dissected it. Every missed recital, every late pickup, every disagreement that happened behind closed doors. It was all being weaponized. I hired my own attorney, Angela Reese, a single mom with a quiet, fierce energy. She didn't sugarcoat anything. You're in for a fight, she told me during our first meeting. If she's asking for full custody, she's not just mad. She's building a case. I asked her how often dads win in court. She hesitated, then said, depends on the state. Depends on the judge. But you need to prepare yourself for a long road. It wasn't just about custody, it was about control. Laura began treating every interaction like a negotiation. Every phone call about the kids felt like walking into a courtroom without a lawyer present. She criticized everything: how I packed Aiden's lunch, how I braided Lily's hair, even how long I let them stay up on weekends. It was like she was documenting my life with the intent to use it against me. She limited communication to email only. Wouldn't answer texts. If I asked for an extra day with the kids, she'd say no. If I was 5 minutes late for pickup, she'd log it in a spreadsheet and send it to her lawyer. I could feel the walls closing in. Worse than all that, though, was watching how it affected Aiden and Lily. Aiden started asking questions. Not direct ones, but little things, laced with uncertainty. Mom said you used to yell a lot. Is that true? Are you gonna move farther away? Why don't you and Mom like each other anymore? He asked them like he was gathering evidence, not just trying to understand. Like he'd been put in the middle and told to pick a side. That tore me apart. Lily became clingier. She'd cry when I dropped her off, sometimes wrapping her arms around my neck so tight I had to gently peel her off. One time she whispered, "Don't let them take me away, Daddy." I almost broke right there on the sidewalk. I tried to be strong. Tried to be calm, consistent, the parent they could depend on. But inside, I was unraveling. The first court hearing was brutal. We sat in front of a judge while Laura's attorney painted me as an absent father. Said I was emotionally unreliable. Claimed I prioritized work over family and created an environment of uncertainty and emotional inconsistency. It was surreal. He made me sound like a stranger. My attorney fought back. She pointed to my clean record, my active involvement, The way I never missed a support payment or a scheduled visit. But I could feel the judge leaning toward caution. Toward the mother. And then came the temporary custody order. Laura would remain the primary custodian. I'd get weekends and one midweek dinner visit. That moment felt like being told my presence in my children's lives was optional. Like I had been demoted to a part-time dad. When I told Aiden, he nodded and said, okay. But he wouldn't look at me. Lily didn't understand at all. Why can't I stay longer, she asked, small fingers gripping my coat. Did I do something wrong? I wanted to scream, cry, rip the whole system apart, and rebuild it from scratch. But all I could do was kneel down, kiss her forehead, and say, no, sweetheart. This isn't your fault. None of this is. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the empty kids' room with the bunk beds I'd just put together. The sheets were still crisp. Their favorite stuffed animals lined the wall, untouched. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Divorce wasn't supposed to make me a visitor in my own children's lives. But I wasn't done. This wasn't over. I was going to fight not for revenge, not for ego, but for the right to be there, to be the father they needed, even if the system tried to write me out. Even if the woman I once loved was now standing on the other side of the battlefield. The court called it shared custody. But anyone watching from the outside wouldn't have seen the truth. Laura had the kids. I had visitation. On paper, it sounded reasonable, every other weekend, plus dinner on Wednesdays. But in practice, it was like trying to parent through a keyhole. You get a glimpse, a sliver, but you're locked out of the full picture. My Wednesday dinners with Aiden and Lily were supposed to be a bright spot. I'd race from work, pick them up from the drop-off point, a gas station parking lot of all places, and we'd head to the same little diner every week. Booth by the window, grilled cheese and chocolate milk for Lily, chicken tenders for Aiden. But even those nights started getting harder. Some weeks, Laura claimed they had homework emergencies or school projects that couldn't be missed. Other times, she'd say they were sick. I didn't argue. You don't want to be the dad who forces his kids out of bed with the flu. But the pattern became clear. The excuses weren't just inconvenient. They were calculated. And when I did get them, it was like trying to break through a wall of fog. Aiden sat quietly, poking at his food. He barely made eye contact. He answered questions like he was being deposed. How's school? Fine. Anything exciting happen this week? Not really. I'd try again. Still liking history class? Guess so. I'd laugh, try to joke, guess so? That doesn't sound like the Aiden who used to talk about World War II facts over cereal. He shrugged. It wasn't just awkward. It was like someone had pressed mute on the connection we once had. Lily was better. Still smiley. Still snuggly. But even she was starting to ask things that didn't feel like they came from her. Mom says your house is smaller because you don't take care of money. Mom said you forgot to pick us up once and she had to come get us. Why don't you help Mommy more? I tried not to flinch. I answered carefully. Always gently. Always with the goal of not dragging her mother into it. The last thing I wanted was to pull my kids into a war, but it was clear they were already in the middle of one. They were just too young to know it. Weekends were our reset button. At least, they used to be. I'd planned every hour. Mini golf, movie night, pancake breakfast, playgrounds. I bought them each a toothbrush and pajamas to keep at my place, filled the fridge with their favorite snacks, hung up their art on the fridge. I wanted them to feel like it was home, not just some crash pad between school days. But the distance kept growing. Aiden started asking if he could just stay home on my weekends. When I pressed, he said he had a birthday party or that he was tired. Once, he told me Mom said I should stay back because I have a big test and I need to focus. The test wasn't until the following Thursday. I started documenting everything, every missed visit, every text I sent that went unanswered, every time Laura switched plans without notice, every time the kids said something that made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I created a spreadsheet. Date, time, incident, response. It made me feel cold, mechanical, but I had no choice. I wasn't just fighting to see my kids. I was fighting a slow erosion of our bond. The kind of erosion you don't notice until one day you wake up and your son is a stranger. Angela, my lawyer, reviewed the log and gave me a small nod. This is good. Judges like patterns. Patterns. My life with my children had become a case study in behavioral patterns and court evidence. But what I really wanted was a normal Sunday. Not court orders. Not exchanges in parking lots. Just a lazy Sunday where I could make waffles while Aiden sat at the counter talking about comic books and Lily dressed up the cat in princess costumes. One day, after a particularly tense drop-off, I saw Laura whisper something to Aiden as he got out of her car. He nodded solemnly. When he walked over, he didn't hug me. Didn't even say hi. He slid into the passenger's seat and stared straight ahead. His face was blank. "You okay, bud?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer. We drove in silence for several minutes. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Why are you making Mom so sad all the time?" My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "She says you're trying to take us away from her. That you want to ruin her life." I pulled over. I turned in my seat and looked at him, not with anger, but with pain. "Aiden, I would never take you away from your mom. I just want to be your dad. Like I've always been." He didn't say anything. He just looked out the window. That night, after dropping him off, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot and cried. Not the loud kind of crying. The quiet, breathless kind that comes when you're losing something piece by piece and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This wasn't shared custody. This was slow-motion erasure. But I kept showing up. Because I knew that one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, the truth would matter. And I would be ready. I never wanted a war. But when someone starts rewriting your life without your permission, when they twist your love for your kids into a liability, you either stand still and lose everything, or you fight like hell. I chose to fight. Angela and I sat across from each other in her small downtown office, surrounded by piles of manila folders and legal pads filled with tight handwriting. She wore her usual blazer, her glasses pushed up on her head, like she'd been working nonstop since sunrise. Because she had. "Here's what we need," she said, flipping through her notes. Documented visitation denials. Proof of active involvement. Text messages showing obstruction. Any evidence of parental alienation. I slid my laptop across the desk. It's all there. Emails, texts, the calendar logs, the missed visits. Even some recordings from our drop-offs where she got confrontational in front of the kids. Angela looked impressed, but not surprised. "You're more organized than half the attorneys I know." When your kids are on the line, you learn fast. We filed for modification. I was asking for 50-50 custody, nothing more, nothing less. Equal time. Equal say. A right to parent, not supervise. Laura, of course, responded with fire. Her lawyer submitted a rebuttal filled with claims. I was disruptive to the children's emotional stability, that my work schedule made consistency impossible, that I'd created an unsafe emotional environment during visits. That one hit hard. Unsafe? Angela leaned over and said, "They're trying to create a narrative. It's what they do. But we can beat it." The court scheduled a hearing. Not the final one, just a status conference. But it felt like the first battle in a long campaign. And it was clear neither side was backing down. In the days leading up to it, I became obsessed with preparation. I reviewed every communication Laura and I had exchanged in the past year. I rehearsed responses to every possible attack. I reached out to character witnesses, teachers, coaches, even our old neighbor, Mrs. Halverson, who'd seen me cart Lily home from preschool every Wednesday like clockwork for years. Aiden's teacher, Mr. Bryan, wrote a statement describing me as an involved and responsive parent who showed up to conferences and emailed about homework assignments. Lily's piano instructor described me as engaged and attentive. It felt good to see the truth on paper. But truth isn't always what wins in court. On the morning of the hearing, I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I ironed my shirt twice. I checked and rechecked my files, my notes, my tie. When I arrived at the courthouse, Laura was already there, dressed in a crisp navy suit. She didn't look at me. Randall, her lawyer, gave me a smug once-over and smiled like a man who thought he'd already won. The judge was a gray-haired woman named Karen Delaney. Stern, but fair. I clung to that word fair like a lifeline. The hearing was tense. Laura's team started by painting a picture of chaos, a father too busy for routine, too emotionally unstable for consistency. They claimed I overstepped boundaries, that I pressured the children, that I was using court time to punish their mother. Angela countered calmly, professionally. She laid out a timeline of missed visits, showed texts where I'd been ignored, played a short recording of a drop-off where Laura accused me loud enough for the kids to hear of ruining their lives. Judge Delaney asked questions, took notes, watched us all closely. Then she leaned forward. I want a child custody evaluation done. Neutral third party. Interviews with both parents, both children. Teachers. Therapists, if applicable. Angela nodded. I knew this was good. It meant the judge wasn't buying Laura's version of things without looking deeper. But it also meant more time. More weeks of visitation. More missed bedtime stories. More being a guest in my kids' lives while the wheels of justice turned slowly, methodically. Outside the courtroom, Laura passed by me in the hallway without a glance. Aiden and Lily weren't there. That hurt. Every time I showed up to court without seeing their faces, it felt like I was defending myself to ghosts. They were the reason I was fighting, but they were nowhere near the battlefield. Angela caught up with me in the lobby. You did well today, she said. Doesn't feel like it. It will. This judge isn't rushing anything, which means she's paying attention. That's what you want. I just want my kids. I know. I drove home that day with my stomach in knots. The world outside the courtroom looked normal, people walking their dogs, picking up coffee, going about their lives. But my world was paused, stuck between arguments and affidavits. Still, something had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. The judge had heard me. My evidence was on record. The wheels were moving. And in the middle of it all, my son was watching. I didn't know it at the time, but Aiden had already started writing his letter. There's a kind of silence between a parent and a child that's worse than any scream. It's not angry. It's not loud. It's just hollow, like a phone line with no one on the other end. That's how Aiden sounded more and more with each visit, like his voice was getting farther and farther away, and no matter how much I reached for it, I couldn't catch up. He used to run to me at pickups. Used to wrap his arms around my waist like a linebacker and say things like, "Missed you, Dad." But now he climbed out of the car slowly. Quiet. Backpack slung low, hoodie up, eyes down. Hey? But I'd say, hey. One word. No smile. No warmth. Just static. The first time I noticed it wasn't just a mood swing was on a Saturday morning, a few weeks after the custody hearing. I'd planned the day to the minute, breakfast at our favorite diner, then the arcade, then lunch by the lake with those overpriced sandwiches he liked. Lily was bouncing with excitement. Aiden looked like he was heading to a dentist. He barely touched his food. At the arcade, he wandered off, texting instead of playing. When I asked if something was wrong, he just shrugged. It's fine. But it wasn't. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, I heard him whispering in the bathroom. When I knocked gently and asked if he was okay, there was a pause. Then he said, yeah, but his voice cracked. He came out, red-eyed, phone clutched in his hand. Who were you talking to? No one. You sure? I said I'm fine. I didn't press him. I didn't want to push too hard. But inside, I knew. He was talking to Laura. She was still in his ear, even here, even now. Lily noticed it, too. She asked me one night, in her soft little bedtime voice, Why is Aiden so grumpy at your house? I smiled sadly. Maybe he's just having big feelings. Sometimes it's hard being in two homes. She nodded like she understood. But she was 6. What she understood most was love. And what she needed most was consistency. That night, Aiden stayed up after she went to bed. I found him sitting on the couch, eyes on the TV, not watching. I sat beside him, quiet for a minute. You know, you can talk to me about anything. You don't have to bottle it up. He nodded, still didn't look at me. I know this is hard, I said. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish we could go back to the way things were. Or, at least figure out something new that doesn't feel so broken. He finally looked at me. And what he said next broke me. Mom said you're just doing this to make her life harder. That if you really loved us, you'd stop fighting. I swallowed hard. Is that what you think? I asked. He looked away. I don't know. I don't want to keep switching houses. I wanted to stop. I'm not fighting to make things harder, I said carefully. I'm fighting to be your dad. That's all I've ever wanted. He didn't answer. The next morning, he barely said goodbye. And when I dropped him off at Laura's, she didn't even pretend to smile. She opened the door like I was a stranger. Aiden, she said softly, you okay, honey? He nodded, stepped past me, and didn't look back. I stood there holding Lily's hand, staring at the closed door, wondering when my son stopped seeing me as home. Angela had warned me about this. Older kids, she said, they get pulled in deeper. They're easier to influence, and they carry guilt like boulders. I asked her what I should do. Keep showing up. Be calm. Be present. Don't badmouth his mother, no matter what you hear. So I did. I showed up to every soccer game, even if he didn't wave. I sat in the bleachers with a smile, even when Laura glared at me like I was trespassing. I cheered. I brought water bottles. I clapped when he missed, and I clapped when he scored. And still, the silence grew. But there were moments, tiny flashes that gave me hope. One night, while driving home, I saw him glance at me through the rearview mirror. Just for a second. And there was something there. Not quite warmth. But not resentment either. Just recognition. A flicker. Another time, I caught him laughing at a dumb joke Lily made. His guard dropped. His real self peeked through. I held on to those moments like lifelines. Because I didn't know it yet, but Aiden was writing something. He was trying to make sense of the chaos around him. And in that process, he was doing the one thing I couldn't. He was telling the truth. When the letter from the court arrived announcing the appointment of a child custody evaluator, I sat at my kitchen table holding it like it was the golden ticket. I hadn't felt this level of cautious optimism in months. Maybe someone would finally listen, not just to me, but to the kids. To what was really happening behind closed doors. The evaluator's name was Dr. Karen Ellsworth. Child psychologist. Nearly 2 decades of experience. Known for being thorough, impartial, and no-nonsense. That last part made me nervous and hopeful at the same time. I didn't need someone to coddle me. I needed someone who could cut through the mess and see the truth, that I was being slowly pushed out of my children's lives. Angela helped prep me. She'll want to see your home. Your interactions with the kids. She'll probably ask tough, uncomfortable questions. Don't sugarcoat. Just be honest. I cleaned the apartment like it was about to be photographed for a real estate listing. Wiped fingerprints from walls. Fluffed the couch cushions. Put out fresh fruit and photos, real ones. Not staged. Ones of Aiden with a popsicle melting down his hand. Lily in my arms during a snowy walk. Little things, real things. Dr. Ellsworth visited the following Tuesday. She arrived precisely on time, clipboard in hand, glasses low on her nose, neutral smile. Her energy was calm but penetrating, like someone who'd heard every story and excuse 100 times before. Let's start with a quick tour, she said. I walked her through the apartment, pointing out the kids' room with their bunk beds, the art projects taped to the fridge, the books on the shelf. And this is where you spend most of your time together? Yeah, I said. We play board games here. Watch movies on weekends. They like building forts between the couch cushions. She nodded, scribbling notes. Then she sat across from me at the dining table and started her questions. How would you describe your co-parenting relationship with Laura? I chose my words carefully. Strained. We don't communicate well. She's made decisions without involving me, and I feel like she's trying to limit my involvement. Has there ever been physical or verbal abuse? Never. Not even close. Any history of substance abuse, mental health issues? No. Do you feel your children are being influenced by the other parent? I hesitated, then said yes. I believe Aiden especially is hearing things about me that are affecting how he sees our relationship. Can you give examples? I gave her a few, the comments, the mood shifts, the things Aiden had said that mirrored Laura's accusations almost word for word. I tried not to sound bitter. Just factual. She jotted it all down. Next came the home observation visit with the kids. Lily was thrilled to see a new face. She showed Dr. Ellsworth her princess coloring books, her room, even her secret hiding spot under the bed. Aiden was more guarded. He shook her hand politely, answered questions with short, practiced responses. When she asked him what he liked about being at Dad's house, he paused for a long time, then said, "It's quiet here." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" she asked gently. "I don't know." Dr. Ellsworth didn't react, just nodded and moved on. Later, she pulled me aside. "He's distant," she said. "Not hostile, just disconnected. Like he's trying to make sure he says the right thing." That stung more than if she'd said he was angry, because it meant he didn't feel safe being himself around me. The next few weeks were filled with interviews at Laura's house, at the kids' schools, even with their pediatrician. I had no idea what she was hearing on the other side, and it made me restless. Every day that passed felt like time lost with my children. Every unanswered question sat like a weight on my chest. Aiden barely spoke on our weekends. Lily was still her bubbly self, but even she asked, "Why does that lady keep asking me questions about you and Mommy?" "She's just trying to help us figure out how to make things better," I said. "Are you in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. I just want us to have more time together." She blinked. "Like before?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Like before." The report wasn't due for another month, but Dr. Ellsworth agreed to a follow-up conversation in person. I met her at her office, a small space with beanbag chairs and picture books tucked into corners. It smelled faintly like vanilla and coffee. "I can't share details yet," she said, "but I'll say this. Aiden is conflicted. He's trying to protect both of you. He feels responsible for your pain." My throat tightened. He's 12. He shouldn't have to carry that. I know. That's why I'm going to recommend counseling, family counseling, for all three of you. You, Aiden, and Laura. It won't fix everything, but it might give him a space to let go of that pressure. I nodded. "And custody?" She closed her folder. "I have more work to do before making a formal recommendation. But I believe that both children benefit from consistent access to both parents. That will be reflected in my report." It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Something real. As I walked out of her office, the weight didn't leave my chest, but it shifted. For the first time in months, it felt like someone had actually seen me. Like someone had looked past the accusations and the paperwork and into the actual relationship I had with my kids. I didn't know what the judge would do with Dr. Ellsworth's report. But I knew this. I hadn't imagined the love between me and my children. And even if that bond had been twisted, tested, and pushed to the brink, it was still there, waiting to be fought for. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like it was humming. Thick. Official. Unmistakable. Dr. Ellsworth's full custody evaluation report, sealed, confidential, and impossible to ignore. I stared at it for 10 full minutes, half afraid to open it. I had replayed our last conversation 100 times. She'd hinted at fairness, at truth. But in family court, truth is never black and white. I took a breath, slid my finger under the flap, and unfolded the pages. The introduction was boilerplate. Credentials. Scope of evaluation. Methods used. Interviews, observations, collateral contacts. But the real heat was in the body of the document. First, parenting strengths. She described me as a consistent and emotionally available parent who maintains appropriate boundaries and seeks to foster a healthy emotional environment. She noted my attention to detail, my willingness to facilitate communication, and my respectful attitude during interviews, even when the subject matter was clearly painful. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then came concerns. Laura's section. Dr. Ellsworth didn't mince words. She wrote that Laura displayed difficulty distinguishing between co-parenting concerns and personal grievances. She documented instances of unilateral decision-making, repeated failure to honor agreed visitation, and a tendency to speak negatively about me in front of the children, especially Aiden. There it was, in writing, but the part that hit the hardest was Aiden's section. Aiden presented as guarded, careful, and at times emotionally conflicted. He expressed confusion about the custody process and indicated that he often feels caught in the middle. While he did not overtly express a preference for one parent, subtle cues, including body language and word choice, suggest internalized loyalty conflict. When asked about his father, Aiden referenced multiple negative claims that appear to originate from the mother, but were not substantiated by independent sources. He appeared anxious when discussing perceived expectations from each parent. I felt sick, not because I was being accused, but because it was right there, in black and white, that my son was being emotionally stretched like a rubber band, pulled taut by forces he didn't fully understand. Then, the evaluator's recommendation. Given the emotional climate surrounding the current parenting plan, I recommend a shift toward a true 50-50 custody arrangement, with structured transitions and co-parent counseling. The goal should be to reduce conflict, promote stability, and preserve the children's relationships with both parents. Additionally, I recommend individual therapy for Aiden, as he shows signs of early emotional parentification and undue loyalty strain. My knees nearly gave out. It was validation, but it was also heartbreak. He was trying to protect us both. He was carrying more than any 12-year-old ever should. Angela called an hour later. I read it, she said. This is strong. Very strong. I can't believe she saw it so clearly. She's been doing this a long time. Good evaluators know how to read between the lines. The judge is going to pay attention to this. When's the next hearing? 2 weeks. 14 days. That's all that stood between me and the chance to rebuild what had been slowly unraveling for months. But even as the legal ground began to shift in my favor, I couldn't stop thinking about Aiden's eyes in that evaluator's report, how they probably looked when he answered those questions. Nervous, confused, guarded. He wasn't choosing between us. He was trying to survive us. That weekend, during our time together, I didn't bring up the report. I didn't say anything about court or Dr. Ellsworth. I just made pancakes, asked about his science project, and let Lily dress the dog in a superhero cape. But Aiden was quiet. Later, when Lily went to bed, I sat next to him on the couch. I read your evaluation, I said gently. He tensed. I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I'm not mad at you. I'm not disappointed in anything you said. You were honest. That's all I ever want from you. He looked down at his hands. I just hate all of this, he whispered. I wish none of it ever happened. Me too, I said. Then, to my surprise, he leaned into me. Not much. Just enough. Enough to know I was still in there, still someone he trusted. And then he said I wrote something. I turned toward him. What do you mean? For school. Kind of. It's not for class. It's just. I don't know. I just needed to write it. He didn't give it to me. Not then. But I saw the corner of a folded page poking from the front pocket of his backpack as he left the next morning. And I had no idea at all, that it would be the very thing that would change everything. I didn't expect to find it. Aiden had already packed his bag, and I was just cleaning up the breakfast dishes when I noticed it. A single sheet of paper, crumpled and half-folded, wedged deep in the side pocket of his backpack. I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't like me to invade his privacy, but something about the way he'd tucked it away, hidden, yet so close, made my stomach churn with the feeling that it might be something important. Something real. I picked it up carefully, unfolded it, and sat down at the table. At first, I thought it was just a typical school assignment kind of letter. He had a lot of those, essays for English class, short stories he'd scribbled for fun. But as I read, the words didn't sound like an assignment at all. They didn't sound like anything he'd ever written for school. It was raw, honest, heart-wrenching. Dear Dad, I'm not sure where to start, but I know I need to say some things. I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. I'm tired of being told one thing by Mom and something different by you. I'm tired of hearing that I have to choose. I don't want to choose. I don't want to hurt either of you. But it's so hard to keep it all in my head. I feel like I'm being torn apart. I hate that I can't just be a kid anymore like when things were normal. I don't know how to fix it. I love you. But I love Mom too. And I hate that this is all happening. I hate that it feels like everything's falling apart. I don't know if you'll ever really understand, but I hope you do. Love. Aiden. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a letter. It was a cry for help. Aiden wasn't just hurt. He was overwhelmed, consumed by guilt, by confusion, by a reality no kid should have to face. The words rang in my head, repeating like an echo. I don't want to choose. That was it, wasn't it? He'd been caught in the middle of this war, between two people he loved. And now he was carrying the weight of that love like an anchor, dragging him down. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands, fighting back tears. The note wasn't just his emotional truth. It was the key to understanding everything that had gone wrong between us. He didn't want to pick a side. He didn't want this fight. He just wanted peace. But peace was something I couldn't give him, not yet. Not while the battle for his future raged on. I carefully folded the letter again and slid it back into his backpack. I didn't know if he had written it to me or if he even wanted me to read it, but it didn't matter anymore. The letter had spoken louder than any of the words in our custody hearings. It told me everything I needed to know about what Aiden was really going through. And it gave me something that I hadn't had before, clarity. I had to stop thinking about what I needed, about what I wanted. Aiden wasn't asking for more of me. He wasn't asking for more of Laura. He was asking for us to stop fighting. For us to stop forcing him to choose. That evening, after dropping Aiden off at Laura's, I sat in my car for a while, staring at the front door of her house, letting the weight of the moment sink in. I wasn't ready to give up yet. Not by a long shot. But I knew now that my fight wasn't just for custody. It was for Aiden. For his peace. For his future, free of the emotional burden that was being placed on him. The next few days were filled with moments of reflection. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter and how it encapsulated everything Aiden was feeling, everything he'd been too afraid to say out loud. He didn't want to disappoint anyone. He didn't want to break anyone's heart. But what he didn't understand was that his silence, his unwillingness to take sides, was breaking all of us. It was breaking him, too. The next court date was fast approaching, and I knew that I couldn't walk into that courtroom without showing the judge exactly what Aiden was experiencing. The letter was a part of that. It was the missing piece of the puzzle that had been so difficult to put together. I would need to present it carefully. It was Aiden's truth, and I needed to respect that. But I also knew that it was time to have a conversation with Laura, a real one. Not one of those passive-aggressive exchanges in the hallway of the courthouse. Not the cold, calculated talks we'd had over the phone or in front of lawyers. This one needed to happen face-to-face. I needed to show her that I wasn't just fighting for custody. I was fighting for our kids' peace. Maybe it was too late to fix everything. Maybe we were too far gone. But Aiden's letter gave me something that I hadn't had before, the hope that we could still find a way back to each other. Not as a couple. That ship had sailed. But as parents who shared a common goal, to stop hurting our kids, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The day I finally decided to talk to Laura face to face, I wasn't sure what to expect. We'd had our share of conversations over the past few months, most of them over email or mediated by our lawyers. But none of those felt real. None of them felt like they were about our kids. They were more about who could claim victory in the court of law. Today, though, I was done with all of that. I needed her to understand that this wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't even about me or her anymore. It was about Aiden. It was about Lily. It was about stopping the cycle of anger and division that was suffocating all of us, especially our children. I called her early in the morning when I knew she'd be up with the kids. "Laura, can we talk? I think it's time. Just you and me. No lawyers, no court. Just us." She hesitated on the other end, and I could almost feel the tension in her silence. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "When?" "Tonight. I'll come over after the kids are in bed." I arrived at her place just after 8 p.m., knocking lightly on the door. It felt strange, standing in front of the house we once shared, our old home. The space still held pieces of us, reminders of the life we'd tried to build. But now it felt foreign. When Laura opened the door, I could tell she was bracing herself for a fight. But she didn't look angry. Just weary. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. I stepped into the living room and took a deep breath. The room was quiet. The kids were tucked away upstairs, and it felt like the world had paused just for this moment. We sat down across from each other on the couch, neither of us sure how to begin. "I don't want to do this anymore, Laura," I said finally, my voice steady but low. "The fighting, the accusations, the back and forth, it's destroying them." She looked at me, her face softening just a little. "I don't want to do it either, Daniel. But I don't know how else to protect them. You don't understand what I've been dealing with." "I do understand," I said. "I know you're trying to protect them. But the way we've been handling this isn't protecting anyone. It's hurting them more than anything. Aiden is stuck in the middle, Laura. And so is Lily. I can see it in their faces. I'm sure you can, too." She looked down, running her hand through her hair. "I never wanted this. You know that. But every time I try to communicate with you, it feels like you're just fighting me. Like you're trying to take everything from me. I don't want to take anything from you, Laura. I just want to be a dad. I want my kids to have a real relationship with me, without all this noise." She exhaled sharply, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I didn't want to be the one to make everything difficult. But every time you came back into their lives, I felt like you were just making promises you couldn't keep. You were there one day, gone the next. It wasn't fair to them. They needed stability." I swallowed hard. She was right. I hadn't always been the kind of father I wanted to be, the kind of father Aiden and Lily deserved. "I know," I said quietly, "and I've regretted it every day since." There was a pause, an awkward, painful silence. But then I remembered the letter. Aiden's letter. The one he'd hidden from me, and yet it was the one thing I knew I had to share with Laura if there was any hope of fixing this. "I found something," I said. "Aiden wrote something. He didn't give it to me, but I found it in his backpack. And I think it's the most honest thing I've ever seen him write." Laura frowned. "What do you mean? What did he say?" I hesitated, trying to collect myself. "He said he's tired of having to choose. He's tired of trying to make us happy when he's the one who's hurting." Laura's eyes softened. "He really said that?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the letter again. "He's not asking us to fix it, Laura. He's not asking for us to come back together. He's just asking us to stop fighting." She exhaled slowly, rubbing her forehead. "I didn't realize it was that bad for him. I thought I was protecting him by keeping him away from all this. We're both doing that. We're both trying to protect them, but we're not. Not like this." There was a long pause, and for the first time in what felt like ages, we weren't at odds. There was no animosity, no blame. It was just two parents, sitting together, realizing that the real battle was not against each other, it was for our children. "I don't know how to fix this," Laura said quietly. "I don't even know where to start." "Maybe we start by listening," I said. "Listening to what Aiden needs, what Lily needs, what we need. We don't have to agree on everything, but we need to stop making them choose sides." She nodded slowly, her eyes still downcast, but there was something different in them now, something like the faintest glimmer of hope. "I don't want to lose them, Daniel. I can't. I've already lost so much." "We haven't lost them yet, Laura. But we will if we don't change. If we don't start working together." It wasn't a grand solution. There was no sudden breakthrough or magical resolution. But as we sat there, talking quietly and honestly, I felt something shift. Something small, but powerful. For the first time in months, the distance between us seemed a little less. Maybe, just maybe, we were starting to find our way back to the same team. For Aiden. For Lily. For us. The week after my conversation with Laura felt like stepping into uncharted territory. We had agreed to start family counseling. It wasn't easy. Our past was still heavy between us, and we both carried the scars of months, even years, of resentment and hurt. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. The counselor's office was nothing like I expected. It wasn't a sterile, intimidating space with cold chairs and harsh lighting. Instead, it felt more like a living room, soft, comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. The therapist, Dr. Green, was a woman in her mid-40s with calm eyes and a voice that didn't rush, never demanding anything from you, only offering understanding. She had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. I was surprised when Laura showed up on time, looking almost open, though the tension still clung to her. She was as nervous as I was. We both were. But we had made a promise to Aiden, to Lily, and to ourselves. We would try. Dr. Green's first question, as simple as it seemed, caught me off guard. "Why are you here today?" she asked, looking at both of us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel Laura's eyes on me, and I knew she was waiting for me to answer. So I did. "We're here because our kids are suffering," I said, my voice steady. "Because we can't keep doing this. We can't keep fighting." Laura shifted in her seat. "I don't want to fight anymore. I just want what's best for them. But every time we try to talk, it feels like we're not on the same page." "I hear you," Dr. Green said gently. "You're both saying that you want what's best for your kids. But in order to do that, you need to understand what's going on inside yourselves and inside each other." I could see Laura biting her lip, clearly holding something back. Dr. Green turned to her. "Laura, tell me a little bit about your relationship with Daniel. What's it like for you now?" Laura took a deep breath. "It's hard. We've been apart for over a year now, and we've tried to co-parent, but it feels like we're always fighting over the same things. We never agree on anything, and I'm scared that if we keep this up, we'll lose our kids for good." I could hear the raw emotion in her voice, the fear, the frustration. I felt the same way. We had been going in circles for so long, neither of us knowing how to break the cycle. Dr. Green nodded thoughtfully. "That's very common in situations like this. You're both carrying a lot of emotion from the past. But if you can learn how to communicate more effectively, you can start to break down those walls. And that's what we're going to work on today." For the next hour, Dr. Green guided us through a series of exercises, simple questions, reflections, and active listening. She asked us to focus on what we wanted for our children and how we could align our actions to meet those needs. It wasn't easy. Every time Laura spoke, I could feel the weight of the resentment I'd carried for so long, resentment over her decisions, the way she'd handled the separation, the hurtful things we'd said to each other during our worst moments. But I kept my focus on the bigger picture. I needed this to work. For Aiden. For Lily. For our family. By the end of the session, I was exhausted. But something in the air had shifted. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was a start. Laura and I were talking, really talking, without the usual defensiveness. I wasn't asking for more custody or trying to prove I was the better parent. I was just listening, and I think she was too. As we left the office, I could tell that the walls between us weren't fully gone. But they were crumbling. We had something to build on now, and that was more than I could have hoped for a week ago. The days that followed weren't without their challenges. We still had disagreements. There were moments when I could feel the old tension creeping back into our conversations, the urge to argue or fight back. But each time, we managed to pull ourselves back, just like Dr. Green had taught us. We listened to each other. We tried to understand. Aiden seemed to sense the change, too. He wasn't quite as distant as he had been. There were moments when I caught him watching me, as if he were waiting for something, waiting for the storm to pass. And slowly, I saw him soften. He wasn't as quick to retreat into himself. He even started talking about his day more, telling me about his classes and his friends, opening up about the things that mattered to him. But there was still something deep in his eyes, a quiet sadness. A longing for something more, for something better. Lily was a little more open, but I could tell she was still adjusting. She'd asked me a lot of questions about the counseling sessions, even though I kept the details private. She wasn't old enough to understand everything, but I could see she was trying to piece it all together in her own way. A few days later, I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through some paperwork for the next court hearing. It was late, and I thought the house was silent. But then I heard it. A knock on the door. I opened it to find Aiden standing there, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his eyes wide and tired. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, like he was waiting for permission. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice soft but clear. About everything." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "Come in, Aiden. You can talk to me about anything." He walked inside, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were finally finding our way back to each other. The first few weeks of counseling had felt like baby steps, small, uncertain movements toward something that felt distant. But those baby steps began to build into something more solid. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but I could see the glimmer of change. The walls between Laura and me, though still there, weren't as high as they once were. And Aiden, despite his initial hesitation, was starting to open up, bit by bit. I spent more time with him than I had in ages, taking him out on weekends, just the two of us, like we used to when he was younger. We'd go to the park or grab ice cream, not forcing any big conversations, just spending time together, letting him know I was there. Lily, too, was more present, more willing to engage with me. She'd often come to me after school, asking me to help her with her homework or to read her a story before bed. Each moment felt like a piece of the broken puzzle we were trying to put together. But there was something else I couldn't shake. A quiet worry that lingered in the back of my mind, something I couldn't fully name, but I knew it was there. Aiden had been quiet, more so than usual, and his smiles never quite reached his eyes. I couldn't help but wonder if, even with all the progress, he was still holding something in. And I feared that if he didn't find a way to express it soon, it might come out in ways we weren't prepared for. A few nights after another counseling session with Dr. Green, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine when Aiden came into the living room. He didn't have that usual bounce in his step, that spark of energy he sometimes had when he'd had a good day. "Aiden?" I called softly, setting the magazine down. He stood there for a moment, his eyes not quite meeting mine, before he sat down beside me. "Dad, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat, but I nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking," Aiden started, his voice quiet, "about the whole family thing. You and Mom. I know we've been trying to get along, and I know you're trying to fix things, but I don't know. It's hard." It feels like no matter what, someone's always upset. I exhaled, feeling the weight of his words. I'd known it wasn't going to be easy for him, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real in a way I hadn't been prepared for. I put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him in just a little closer. "I know, buddy," I said, my voice soft. "It's been tough on all of us. I can't change everything that's happened, but I want you to know that you don't have to carry this alone. You and Lily, you're not the reason we're here, and you're not the ones who have to fix it. We're working on it. We're trying to make things better for you both." Aiden nodded, but I could see that there was more he wanted to say. I gave him a moment, just letting him sit with the silence. "Do you ever think we can all be together again?" he asked finally, his voice tentative. I felt a lump form in my throat. That was the question I had avoided asking myself, the question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Could we ever go back to what we once were? The family we were before everything fell apart? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I wish I could say yes, but I don't want to promise something that might not happen. What I can promise, though, is that we're going to do everything we can to make sure you and Lily are happy. We're going to do better for both of you." Aiden's eyes met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of the boy I used to know, the boy who believed that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But I knew there was still a long way to go. This wasn't just a matter of fixing the pieces. It was about healing wounds that ran deep. The next few days were a mix of progress and setbacks. Laura and I continued to make small but meaningful changes. We found a rhythm, a way of communicating that didn't feel like we were trying to win against each other. For the first time in a long time, we both seemed to put aside our pride for the sake of the kids. There were still moments when one of us would slip, when a sharp word would get said, or an old argument would resurface. But we caught ourselves more often now. We recognized the patterns and took a step back before it spiraled. And then there were the moments that mattered most, the moments when we simply showed up for our kids, when we made time to be present. Like the Saturday morning I spent with Aiden playing basketball at the park, or the night when Laura and I took Lily out for dinner, and she smiled so brightly I felt my heart catch. But even as things seemed to be improving on the surface, I couldn't ignore the fact that there was still a lot of work left to do. There were scars beneath the surface, scars I had to heal inside myself before I could truly help my kids heal. It was a few weeks later, during another family counseling session, when Aiden surprised me again. Dr. Green had asked us to talk about our hopes for the future, to share what we were working toward. As the words came out of my mouth, I felt a sense of vulnerability I hadn't expected. I told her that I wanted to create a life for my kids that was filled with love and stability. A life where they didn't have to choose between their parents or feel torn between two worlds. Laura shared something similar, but when Aiden spoke, I saw something in his eyes that stopped me dead in my tracks. "I want everything to be okay," he said quietly. "I want to stop feeling like it's my fault. I want to stop worrying all the time." It hit me hard, the realization that Aiden had been carrying so much for so long. He hadn't just been struggling with the separation, he'd been carrying the weight of guilt he never should have had to bear. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about fixing the family structure or making things easier on the surface. It was about making sure my kids knew, without a doubt, that they were not to blame. That the love we had for them was unconditional, and that they didn't need to bear the responsibility of our mistakes. The weeks that followed were harder than I had anticipated. At first, the idea of change, of growth, had felt like an exciting new path. But as the days passed, I began to realize just how long and difficult the road would be. Every step forward seemed to be met with 2 steps back, and the emotional weight was starting to take its toll. For every breakthrough in counseling, there were still the late-night arguments, the uncomfortable silences, and the lingering resentment that threatened to undo everything we had worked for. Laura and I had agreed to continue working through our issues, but old habits were hard to break. When the stress of our shared responsibilities or the tension of our past reared its ugly head, the old patterns resurfaced. One of the hardest things was learning to forgive, not just each other, but myself. I knew I had made mistakes in our marriage, and the guilt of my failures as a husband hung over me like a dark cloud. I had tried to be a good father, but even that felt like something I had failed at in certain moments. Laura seemed to be struggling with her own set of demons. Every so often, I would catch her staring off into space, lost in thought, and I knew that she was wrestling with something deep inside her. Sometimes she would pull away, retreating into herself when I tried to reach out, and I felt the distance between us growing wider again. The worst part was that we weren't alone in this struggle. Aiden and Lily felt it too. Aiden was starting to withdraw again. His mood had been fluctuating, and despite the improvements I had seen in him early on, there was now a quiet storm brewing inside him. It was hard to pinpoint exactly what was causing it. Perhaps it was the weight of the separation, or maybe it was the pressure of us trying so hard to rebuild something that felt fragile and fragile. Lily, on the other hand, was still processing it all. I could tell that she was scared. She was a sensitive soul, and the uncertainty of our family's future seemed to be affecting her more than I'd realized. She'd ask me questions about Mom and Dad getting back together, questions I didn't have answers to. The innocence in her voice made me feel even more guilty, as though she was waiting for something that might never happen. It was in one of these moments, when I was lying awake in bed, wrestling with my own self-doubt, that I received a message from Laura. It was a simple text, just a few words, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. I'm thinking of taking a break from everything. Maybe a few days. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. A part of me understood. I could see how difficult it must have been for her to balance all of this. But another part of me felt like we couldn't afford to take a break. We were in the middle of something so delicate, and I didn't want to risk losing the progress we'd made. Still, I couldn't deny the truth in her words. We were both exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. And maybe, just maybe, a break could give us the space we needed to heal. The following days were filled with a sense of unease. Laura took a few days off work, retreating to her parents' house, and I was left to manage the kids on my own. It was harder than I had anticipated. Aiden was distant, retreating into his room most of the time, while Lily seemed more clingy than usual. She would seek comfort in me at the smallest provocation, as if she could sense the tension in the air. It was in those moments that I realized just how much I had been taking for granted. I had been so focused on fixing the cracks in my relationship with Laura that I hadn't paid enough attention to what my kids needed. Aiden was struggling, yes, but Lily was too young to fully understand what was happening. And I was beginning to wonder if, by focusing so hard on trying to get things right with Laura, I had neglected to listen to what my kids were going through. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, as I sat on the couch with Lily beside me, that I received a phone call from Dr. Green. She had asked me to come in for a private session. It wasn't unusual. She often scheduled one-on-one sessions to help work through personal issues. But when I heard her voice on the other end of the line, I could hear the urgency in her tone. "I think it's time to talk about something important," she said. "Would you be able to come in tomorrow?" The next day, I arrived at Dr. Green's office, feeling the familiar knot of nervous anticipation in my stomach. I didn't know what she wanted to discuss, but the tone of her voice had made it clear that this was more than just another counseling session. When I sat down across from her, she looked at me thoughtfully, her expression serious, but not unkind. "Daniel, I've been noticing something in the sessions that I think you need to address," she said. "You're doing well, better than you may realize, but there's something crucial you're missing. You've been focusing on rebuilding the relationship between you and Laura, which is important, but I think the focus needs to shift to something else for now." I sat up straighter, unsure of what she meant. "Your relationship with Aiden," she continued. "It's clear that you've been working hard to get closer to him, but there are some unresolved feelings that he has not shared with you. He's been carrying a lot of guilt, and it's affecting how he's interacting with you. And with his sister." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" Aiden has been doing better. Has he really? She asked gently. Or is he just hiding it? My heart sank. Was I missing something? Had Aiden been hiding his true feelings from me all along? Dr. Green leaned forward. Aiden is a smart kid. He's trying to protect you, just like you're trying to protect him. But this is the part of the process where you need to focus on him. Not as your son who needs to be fixed, but as a child who is dealing with trauma. I nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. It wasn't about me trying to fix everything. It was about being there for Aiden, letting him know it was okay to be vulnerable, that he didn't have to shoulder the weight of everything. The next few days were crucial. I made a concerted effort to spend more time with Aiden, really talking to him. Not about the divorce, not about what was wrong, but just about him. What he liked, what he was feeling, what he needed. And in those moments, I saw something shift. The guard around his heart was still there, but it was slowly lowering, piece by piece. I realized that this was the true test of patience. It wasn't about fixing things overnight. It was about being there, showing up, and giving Aiden the space to heal at his own pace. It's strange how something that feels like a simple, innocent moment can reveal so much. I had always thought that parenting was about big gestures, big talks, big moments. But as I spent more time with Aiden, I was learning that it wasn't about those sweeping acts. It was about the quiet moments, the moments when you show up and simply listen. That afternoon, as I sat with him in the kitchen, eating lunch in near silence, I could feel the tension between us slowly beginning to ease. Aiden wasn't talking much, but his presence was a kind of acknowledgement. He hadn't fully let his guard down yet, but he wasn't retreating, either. It felt like a breakthrough of sorts, though I wasn't sure yet how deep it went. I leaned back in my chair, pushing my plate aside. Aiden, can we talk about something? He hesitated, his gaze flicking to me for a moment before looking back down at his half-eaten sandwich. He nodded slowly. Sure. I know things have been rough between me and your mom, I began. And I know you've been feeling a lot of things about it. But I want you to know something. You and Lily, you two are not the reason any of this happened. Okay. Aiden's lips pressed together as if he was holding something back, but he didn't respond immediately. I was worried that he wasn't hearing me or that he felt like I was just giving him a lecture. But I needed him to know this. I needed him to understand that the weight he was carrying wasn't his to bear. Aiden finally spoke, his voice quiet. I don't want things to get worse. I don't want you and Mom to hate each other. I want things to go back to the way they were. I felt a sharp pang in my chest at his words. He was still clinging to this hope, this desperate wish that things could go back to normal. I could see the way he tried to hold it all together, like he thought it was his job to fix things. Aiden, buddy, I said gently, my voice thick with emotion. I want that too. I do. But I can't promise things will go back to the way they were. What I can promise is that we're going to figure this out together. And no matter what happens, I'm always going to be here for you. And your mom will always love you no matter what. He was quiet for a long time, and I could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing on him. The sadness in his eyes, mixed with that flicker of hope, made me wish I could give him the certainty he was asking for. But the truth was, I didn't know what would happen next. What I did know was that we needed to face the future together, step by step. The days that followed were filled with small victories, silent moments where Aiden and I would play a game of chess or throw the ball in the backyard, just the two of us. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help him open up slowly. One evening, after a long day of work and school, Aiden came to me as I was sitting on the couch. He sat beside me, his usual quiet self. Then, unexpectedly, he turned toward me. Dad, can I tell you something? Aiden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Of course, I said, my attention immediately focused on him. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do to make it better, he admitted, his words coming out in a rush. I looked at him, feeling my heart swell with understanding. I reached over and put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. You don't have to fix anything, Aiden, I said softly. It's not your job. I know it's hard, but we're in this together. We're going to figure it out, okay? Aiden nodded, though I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. But something in his eyes shifted, just a little. A glimpse of trust, of vulnerability that had been buried for so long. Still, for every step forward we took, there were setbacks. Laura and I had our own struggles, too. Some days we found ourselves falling back into old habits, the tension between us rising. I wanted to believe that things were improving between us, but it wasn't always easy. We had our moments where we snapped at each other, moments when the past seemed to haunt us, no matter how hard we tried to leave it behind. I could see the pain in Laura's eyes when we fought, and I knew it was the same pain I carried. We were both trying, but sometimes it felt like we were pushing against a wall that wouldn't budge. Yet, through it all, there were the moments of clarity, moments when we simply connected. A quiet conversation over coffee in the morning. A shared laugh when something funny happened with the kids. The way we could look at each other and know, without saying a word, that we were both doing our best. We were far from perfect, but there were glimmers of hope that kept us going. It was one evening, a week after our breakthrough moment, that I decided to do something special for the kids. I wasn't sure if it would make any difference, but I had to try. I called Aiden and Lily into the living room, where I had set up a movie night with their favorite snacks. "Okay, guys," I said, smiling as they sat down on the couch. "I thought we could all have a little fun tonight. No stress, just us. Sound good?" They exchanged glances, a spark of excitement in their eyes. Aiden, ever the reluctant participant, smiled a little, and Lily clapped her hands together. "Yay!" she cheered, bouncing on the couch. I started the movie, and for a while, everything felt normal. We laughed together, shared stories, and just enjoyed being a family. It wasn't a magic fix. It wasn't going to solve everything. But in that moment, it felt like progress. It felt like we were healing, even if only a little. And that night, after the movie ended and the kids had gone to bed, Laura and I shared a quiet conversation on the porch. The stars hung low in the sky, and the cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around us. It was peaceful, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Do you think we're getting any better?" Laura asked softly. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're trying. That's all we can do." The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was beginning to see that the most important thing was that we were moving forward together. Bit by bit, we were breaking down the walls that had divided us, Aiden, Lily, Laura, and me. It wouldn't be easy, and there were still tough days ahead. But I was starting to believe that healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one step at a time. Some days, it felt like we were moving in slow motion. I knew we were making progress, but it didn't always feel that way. I could see the cracks in our family slowly starting to heal, but there were times when the weight of the past, of everything we had been through, felt so heavy. It was hard to shake the feeling that no matter how much effort we put in, we might never be the same family we once were. But sometimes, change doesn't come in grand moments. Sometimes it arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly, and only later do you realize just how significant it was. That morning started like any other. The kids and I were eating breakfast at the table, and Laura was in the kitchen making coffee. It was the kind of morning that felt comfortable, even if it wasn't perfect. The noise of Aiden and Lily bickering over who would sit next to me at the table didn't bother me anymore. It was a reminder that we were still a family, still navigating the awkwardness, still moving forward. As I watched Aiden, I noticed something. His shoulders were no longer slumped as much. He seemed more at ease, more like the kid I used to know before everything had unraveled. He still wasn't talking much, but there was a subtle shift in the way he carried himself. It was small, but it was there. After breakfast, Aiden asked if I could come to his room for a minute. It was a simple request, but it was something he hadn't done in weeks. I had learned not to take these small moments for granted, so I followed him up the stairs, my heart beating a little faster with anticipation. He closed the door behind us, and we stood in the quiet of his room for a few seconds before he spoke. Dad, I want to show you something, he said, his voice hesitant but determined. I looked at him curiously as he pulled out a notebook from his desk drawer. It wasn't like him to write things down. Aiden had always been more of a quiet observer, preferring to keep his thoughts to himself. But today, he was handing me something. I wrote something, he said, his eyes darting nervously between the notebook and me. I don't know if it's good, but I wanted you to read it. I could sense the vulnerability in his voice, and my heart tightened with empathy. Whatever he had written, I knew it wasn't easy for him to share. I took the notebook from him gently, flipping it open. The pages were filled with scribbled words, the handwriting uneven, like he was trying to find the right way to express himself. At the top of the first page, in bold, messy letters, was the title, The Things I've Never Said. I felt a lump form in my throat as I began reading. Dad, there's so much I want to tell you, but I don't know how. Sometimes, I feel like I'm stuck between wanting things to be normal and wanting to scream because nothing feels normal anymore. I don't know if you can understand that, but I feel like I'm holding on to so many things and it's hard to let go. I miss the way things used to be. I miss when you and Mom weren't so angry all the time, but I also miss you. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want you to know that I'm not mad at you. I don't want to blame you for everything that happened. I don't think I even know who to blame. What I do know is that I want to feel like I'm not losing you. I want to feel like we're still a family, even if it's different now. Aiden. I closed the notebook slowly, my chest tight with emotion. The raw honesty in Aiden's words hit me harder than I had expected. I had known he was struggling, but I hadn't fully understood the depth of his pain. I hadn't realized just how much he was internalizing, how much he was trying to protect me, protect us, from the storm inside his head. I looked up at him, and he was watching me with apprehension, as if waiting for my reaction. I didn't know what to say at first. How could I explain to him that reading his letter had broken something open inside me? How could I tell him that I felt like I had been missing the very thing that would have brought us closer sooner? Aiden, I said softly, my voice catching in my throat. I don't even know how to respond to this. But I want you to know that I hear you. I see you. And I'm so proud of you for sharing this with me. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the relief in his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed to relax just a little bit. It was like the walls he had built up around himself were starting to come down. And even though it wasn't a fix, it was a breakthrough. We sat there in silence for a while, and I realized something. It wasn't the grand gestures or the long, difficult conversations that were going to heal this family. It was the small moments. Like Aiden writing that letter, like him choosing to trust me with his thoughts, that would create the foundation for something better. Later that day, Laura and I had a conversation about Aiden's letter. I told her what had happened, and I could see the way her face softened as I described the moment. We hadn't talked much about how Aiden was doing lately, but this letter was a wake-up call for both of us. Aiden's really trying, isn't he? Laura said, her voice filled with emotion. I think he's just been holding it all inside, afraid to let it out. I nodded, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. Yeah, and I don't think I've been doing enough to help him. I've been so focused on everything else that I forgot to just be there for him. Laura sighed deeply. I think we both have a lot of work to do, but we're getting there. Slowly. We just have to keep showing up for them, even when it feels like we're not making any progress. I agreed. The road was still long and there would be more setbacks. But in that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we were starting to get things right. We were finally breaking down the walls that had kept us apart, and the breakthrough that Aiden had given me was the first sign that we could rebuild slowly, surely, but steadily. That night, as I tucked Aiden into bed, he looked up at me with a small, tentative smile. It wasn't the big smile I had been hoping for, but it was a start. "Good night, Dad," he said quietly. "Good night, buddy," I replied, my heart full. I left his room with a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. We were still in the middle of the storm, still working through the pain. But I knew that we were finally starting to understand each other. And that, in itself, was enough to keep me going. Letting go has always been one of the hardest things for me to do. In some ways, I had spent so much of my life clinging to things the past, memories, relationships, that the thought of releasing them felt like I was unraveling a part of myself. But now, more than ever, I was beginning to realize that letting go wasn't about losing something. It was about making room for something new. That realization hit me like a ton of bricks one afternoon as I sat on the back porch, watching Aiden and Lily play in the yard. They were laughing, chasing each other around with the kind of carefree energy that only children could possess. It should have been a peaceful sight, and in some ways, it was. But as I watched them, I realized how much I had been holding onto, how much I had been holding back, out of fear of what I might lose if I let go. "Dad, look." Lily's voice broke through my thoughts as she ran over, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I can do a cartwheel now." She flung her arms wide and attempted a cartwheel that ended in a half flip, landing her on her backside with a laugh. "That was great, kiddo," I said, laughing along with her. Aiden wandered over next, a little more reserved than his younger sister, but still smiling. There was something different in his eyes, something brighter, less guarded. He had been opening up more lately, and it was both reassuring and heartbreaking at the same time. The more I saw him let his guard down, the more I realized how much of him I had missed, how much I had overlooked while focusing on my own pain. "Aiden, you've been helping her with that, haven't you?" I asked, teasing him lightly. He grinned. "Maybe a little. But don't expect me to do a cartwheel anytime soon." We both laughed, and I noticed how much easier it was to be with him now, how much less effort it took to make him smile. He still had his moments of quiet, his moments of retreating into himself, but the walls between us were slowly coming down. I had to remind myself not to rush it. This wasn't something that would be fixed overnight. I watched as Aiden ran to join Lily, both of them now playing some kind of imaginary game, shouting and giggling together. It was a small, simple moment, but it was a reminder that my kids still needed me. Not just for the big moments, but for the small, everyday moments that made up the fabric of their lives. I realized then that letting go wasn't about abandoning the past. It was about making peace with it. It was about accepting that things had changed, and that those changes didn't have to define me or my relationship with my children. They didn't have to define us. The next few days were a mix of progress and setbacks, as things often are. Laura and I had a long conversation one evening after the kids went to bed, about the future, about where we were going as a family. It was one of those conversations where we acknowledged the uncertainty of everything. We didn't have answers, but we were beginning to find the right questions. "I don't know if we'll ever be the family we were before," Laura said, her voice quiet but steady. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're becoming something new." I sat back, reflecting on her words. "Yeah, maybe we are. Maybe we're starting to build something better, even if it doesn't look the way we thought it would." There was a long pause before Laura spoke again, her voice softer now. "I just want us to be okay. I want Aiden and Lily to be okay. They deserve that." I nodded. "I know. I want that too." But even as I spoke those words, a part of me was struggling to let go of the past. I wasn't just grieving the end of a marriage, I was grieving the version of myself that existed in that time, the person I had been when everything felt more stable, more certain. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much I had changed since all of this started. The pain had transformed me. It had forced me to confront my weaknesses, my mistakes, my regrets. But it had also given me clarity. I wasn't the man I had been before, and that was okay. I could still be a good father, a good person. I could still be there for Aiden and Lily, even if I wasn't the same person I had once been. The next morning, I decided to do something that I had been putting off for weeks. I knew it was time. I had to visit my lawyer. The divorce was finally going to be finalized, and while I had been dreading the moment, I knew it was something I needed to face head-on. For months, I had been avoiding the final step, clinging to the idea of something that was already gone. I had to let go of the past in order to move forward. I had to do it for myself, for my kids, and for Laura. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, I took a deep breath before walking in. The conversation went as expected, with papers to sign, decisions to be made, and the finality of it all settling in. But as I signed the last form, I realized something. The act of letting go wasn't just about letting go of Laura or the marriage. It was about letting go of the version of myself that had been stuck in the past, too. It was about releasing all the guilt, all the what-ifs that had been holding me back. That afternoon, I returned home, and Aiden was waiting for me. I could see the curiosity in his eyes, the same guarded look that had been there for months. But there was something else, too. A sense of hope, maybe, or a question that I couldn't quite put into words. "Dad," Aiden started, his voice hesitant. "Can we talk for a second?" I nodded, motioning for him to sit down beside me on the couch. I could tell that whatever he was about to say was important to him. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I felt my heart racing. Aiden took a deep breath before speaking. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're here. I know things have been crazy, but I'm glad we're starting to figure it out. It feels like things are getting better." I looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his words. It wasn't often that Aiden opened up like this, and I realized just how much he had been holding in. "I'm glad, too," I said quietly. "We're getting there, Aiden. It's not perfect, but we're trying." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't about having everything figured out or finding the perfect solution. It was about knowing that we were moving in the right direction. As I sat there with Aiden, I realized that letting go wasn't just something that I had to do for myself. It was something I had to do for my kids, for our future, and for the family we were becoming. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was finally starting to accept that letting go of the past didn't mean losing everything. It meant making space for something new. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough. Healing is never a straight line. It's jagged, messy, and unpredictable. One day you might feel like you're finally making progress, only to find yourself at a setback the next. But I was starting to realize that this was okay. It was okay because healing wasn't about perfection. It was about growth. And growth, as I was beginning to understand, was something that could only happen when you allowed yourself the space to feel everything, both the pain and the hope. I could tell that Aiden and Lily were adjusting, even if they didn't always show it. They were both still figuring out what our new family dynamic meant. The laughter came more often, but so did the silence. There were moments when the tension in the air felt heavy, like we were all still unsure of what was next. But there were moments, too, when it felt like we might just have a chance at this, at rebuilding what had been broken. Aiden had been especially quiet lately, but in a way that felt different. It wasn't the guarded silence he used to have. It was more thoughtful, more reflective, like he was taking in everything around him, trying to process it all. One afternoon, he came to me, standing in the doorway of the living room, looking hesitant but determined. "Dad," he started, his voice unsure. "I've been thinking, maybe we could go to that game next weekend. You know, the baseball game? I haven't gone in a while and I don't know. It might be fun." My heart swelled. This was the first time Aiden had brought up something like this since the separation. Baseball had been our thing before everything went downhill. It had been one of those bonding moments between us, something that had always made him smile. "You want to go to the game?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I was grinning inside. "I think that's a great idea. We'll make a day of it." "Just the two of us." Aiden nodded, his face lighting up just a little. It wasn't the wide grin he had when he was younger, but it was enough. Enough for me to see that, even though he was still processing everything, he was slowly starting to trust again. The days that followed were filled with small steps forward. Laura and I continued to work on our communication, even though it wasn't always easy. There were still moments when we clashed, old habits, old frustrations resurfacing, but we were learning to listen, to respect each other in new ways. The wounds weren't completely healed, but they were starting to scab over. And maybe that was enough for now. One evening, after dinner, we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. It was a quiet moment, one that had become increasingly rare in the chaos of our lives. Lily was running around the yard again, chasing the dog, and Aiden was sitting next to me, flipping through his phone, lost in his own world. "You know," Laura said, breaking the silence, "I think we're doing better than I expected." I looked over at her, surprised by her words. "Really?" "Yeah," she continued. "I mean, I know things are still tough. But I think we're figuring out how to be a family again. It's not perfect, but it's real. And I think that matters." I nodded, grateful for her honesty. I feel the same way. It's like we're starting over in a lot of ways. We've got to rebuild, but it's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about accepting that we're not who we were, but that doesn't mean we can't still be a family. Laura smiled at that, a small but genuine smile. It was the kind of smile that made me believe in the possibility of change, of healing. We had been through a lot, but maybe this was the first step in truly coming back together. The weekend came, and with it, Aiden and I made our way to the baseball game. The moment we arrived at the stadium, I could feel the weight of everything lifting, just a little. The familiar smells of hot dogs and popcorn, the sounds of the crowd, the crack of the bat hitting the ball, it all brought me back to a simpler time. A time before the pain, before the fear of losing my kids, before everything felt like it was falling apart. Aiden seemed to relax as soon as we sat down in our seats. He leaned back, taking in the atmosphere, and I could see that little glimmer of joy that had been missing for so long. We didn't talk a lot during the game. We didn't need to. Sometimes, silence was its own kind of connection, and in that moment, just sitting side by side, enjoying the game together, felt like a victory. It was proof that we could still find our way back to each other, even if the path wasn't always clear. As the game ended and we walked out of the stadium, Aiden looked up at me, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That was fun, Dad. Thanks for taking me." I squeezed his shoulder. "Anytime, kiddo. Anytime." When we got home, the kids went straight to their rooms to unwind. Laura was already in the kitchen, cleaning up, when I walked in. "How was the game?" she asked, looking up from the counter. "It was good," I said, my heart still light from the evening. "It was just like old times." She nodded, smiling to herself. "I'm glad. It sounds like it was just what you both needed." I agreed. It wasn't just the game, though. It was the fact that we had shared a moment without the heaviness of the past weighing us down. It was the small step forward that felt like a giant leap. The following week, Aiden came to me again, this time with something different. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about what we talked about a while ago. You know, with the letter? I wanted to say that I'm glad we're trying, even if it's not easy." I could tell he was struggling with his emotions, but there was a vulnerability in his words that made my heart ache. "I'm glad, too, Aiden. We'll keep trying. We're in this together." And that was when I realized something important. Healing wasn't just about fixing the damage. It was about showing up again and again. It was about being present, even when it was hard, even when the road seemed long. Healing was messy, but it was possible. And as long as we kept showing up for each other, that was all that mattered. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when you think things are finally settling down, when you feel like you're starting to breathe again, the world has a way of reminding you that the journey is far from over. It was a Tuesday morning, and the house was quiet for once. Laura had already left for work, and the kids were still at school. I had just finished my coffee when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one really came by anymore, not without notice. Maybe a few friends from work or some of the neighbors, but nothing that would warrant an unexpected knock. I got up and walked toward the door, wondering if it was another delivery. But when I opened it, I froze. Standing there, looking a little out of place, was Sarah, the woman I had been married to for almost 10 years. The one I thought I would never see again, At least not like this. Sarah, I said, almost unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. She gave me a half smile, her eyes tired but kind. I know this is unexpected, Daniel, but can we talk? For a moment, I stood there, feeling the weight of the past press against my chest. I wasn't sure what to make of this. I wasn't even sure I wanted to talk to her after everything that had happened. But I knew that running from it wasn't going to solve anything. I had learned that much over the past year, so I stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. We sat down at the kitchen table, the silence between us almost palpable. I wasn't sure where to start. I had so many questions, so many emotions swirling inside of me. But I waited for her to speak first, sensing that whatever had brought her here was something that needed to come from her. I know you probably didn't expect to see me again, Sarah began, her voice softer than I remembered. And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you. But I've been thinking a lot about everything. About the divorce, about the kids, about us. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that too. I'm not sure what to say, Sarah. After everything. I know, she interrupted gently. I know I hurt you, and I know I made things more complicated than they needed to be. But I've been seeing a therapist, Daniel. I've been working on myself. And I realize now that I need to make things right, at least for the kids. They need both of us, in whatever way we can provide. Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected her to take responsibility, to acknowledge the mistakes she'd made. It was a step I hadn't thought was possible. I don't know where we go from here, I said honestly. But I do know that the kids need us to figure this out. They've been through enough. She nodded. That's why I'm here. I want to help. I want to be a part of their lives again, but I don't know how to make up for the time I've missed. I could see the struggle in her eyes. It wasn't easy for her to admit that. But at least she was trying. I don't have all the answers, I replied. I don't even know if things can go back to the way they were. But we can start small, right? For the kids, for ourselves. We have to show them that we're trying. She looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Yeah, I'd like that. The rest of the conversation was filled with more awkward silences and hesitant words, but there was something important happening between us. Something that, at least for the moment, felt like the beginning of healing. It wasn't an easy conversation to have. There were still so many unspoken things, so many wounds that hadn't fully healed. But Sarah's willingness to acknowledge the past and face the future was a step I hadn't expected to see. Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. I don't want to replace you in their lives, Daniel. I just want to be a part of it again. Whatever that looks like. I want to prove to you, and to them, that I can be a good mom. I can do better. I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure if I believed her completely, but I knew that she was making an effort. And that was all I could ask for at this point. Later that evening, when the kids came home from school, I sat down with them at the kitchen table. They could sense that something had changed, something had shifted. The look in their eyes told me they could feel the tension in the air. Aiden was the first to speak. Dad, is everything okay? You seem different tonight. I paused for a moment, unsure of how to explain the conversation with Sarah, unsure of how to navigate the changes happening in our lives. But I knew this moment was important. It was a chance to be honest with them, to start building a new kind of relationship based on transparency. Aiden, Lily, I began, my voice steady but warm. I had a conversation with your mom today. She came by, and we talked. She's been working on herself, and she wants to be a part of your lives again. I know that's a lot to process, and I don't know exactly what that means for us right now. But we're all trying to make things better. For you. For us. Lily looked at me, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. Does that mean we're going to see Mom more? Like, how's that going to work? I don't have all the answers, sweetheart, I said softly. But I promise you this, we're going to figure it out. And we're going to do it together. The following weeks were filled with adjustments. Sarah came by a few more times, always checking in with me and the kids, making an effort to rebuild the relationship she'd fractured. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments when the old wounds resurfaced, but it was progress. Real progress. And that was something I hadn't expected to experience so soon. For Aiden and Lily, things were still complicated. They had their moments of uncertainty, moments when they weren't sure where they stood in this new version of our family. But there were also moments of connection, moments when they laughed with Sarah and felt that spark of familiarity. And in those moments, I could see the future. Not the perfect, fairy tale future I'd once imagined, but something that felt more real, more attainable. A future where we were all just trying to be better for each other. The air felt different lately, lighter, somehow, though I knew deep down that it was still fragile. I had a strange mix of hope and hesitation brewing inside me, a cocktail of emotions that made every day feel like I was walking a tightrope between the past and the future. It had been a few weeks since Sarah's unexpected visit, and since then, things had slowly started to change. Sarah was coming by more often, making an effort to reconnect with the kids, to be there in ways she hadn't been for a long time. I had to admit, it was hard to watch. Not because I didn't want her to be involved, but because it reminded me of what we'd lost and how much damage had been done. The kids seemed to be adjusting, but in their own way. Aiden, as usual, was the most guarded. He'd accepted the fact that his mother was trying to make amends, but he didn't let it in completely. He was still unsure about where she fit into his world. Lily, on the other hand, was more open to the changes. She wanted to believe that everything could go back to normal, and while I admired her optimism, I couldn't promise her that it would. I had spent years wishing for things to go back to the way they were, wishing for the family we once had. But now, as I looked around at the way things were shaping up, I realized that we might never go back to that. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. It was a Saturday morning when the kids and I sat down for breakfast. The usual buzz of the house was muted today, no TV blaring, no phones ringing, just the sound of forks against plates and the occasional clink of a cup being set down. I could tell they were still trying to wrap their heads around everything, still navigating the landscape of this new family dynamic. "Dad," Aiden said, his voice a little more tentative than usual, "can we talk about Mom? Like, what's really going on with her?" I paused, looking at him. This was it. This was the moment where the rubber met the road, where the conversation we'd been avoiding needed to happen. "What do you want to know, Aiden?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but open. Aiden shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping on the edge of his cereal bowl. "I don't know. I guess I just don't understand. I mean, she's trying, I guess. But it's weird, you know? I don't really know how to feel about it. I didn't think she'd actually come back. Not like this." I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, and I knew that uncertainty was what he'd been carrying around for a while now. He was trying to make sense of the changes, trying to find his footing in a world that felt unstable. "It's okay to feel confused," I said softly. "You don't have to figure it all out right away. Your mom made some mistakes, and it's going to take time for things to heal. But she's trying to be a part of your life again, and that's all we can ask for. You don't have to trust her all at once, Aiden. You don't have to forgive her right away, either. But you should know that she loves you, and she wants to be there for you, however that looks." Aiden nodded, but I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. He wasn't convinced. I didn't blame him. It was hard to believe in something when the foundation had been shaken so violently. Lily, sitting across from us, looked at Aiden with concern. "Do you think it's going to be okay, Dad?" "I mean, Mom's really trying, right?" I looked at my daughter, who was more open than her brother, more willing to see the good in the situation. Her optimism was both a gift and a challenge. She wanted everything to work out, wanted things to be like they were. But I couldn't give her that promise. "I think it's going to be okay, Lily. It might not look exactly the way we want it to, but we're going to keep working on it. All of us. And that's what matters." Lily smiled, though there was still a hint of doubt in her eyes. She was searching for something solid to hold on to, something to believe in. And I knew that, like me, She was still figuring out what that looked like. The rest of the day was spent trying to find a sense of normalcy. The kids played outside, I cleaned up the garage, and Sarah stopped by to pick up some things for the kids. I could tell that she was still unsure of how much space to take up in our lives, but she was slowly finding her way. She was trying to be there for them, trying to show that she was invested. And, in her own way, I had to give her credit for that. As the day wore on, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come. There were still so many unanswered questions, so many things I didn't know. But I could feel something shifting within me. I could feel that hope, though tentative, was beginning to take root again. I sat down with a cup of coffee later that evening, watching the kids play from the window. They were laughing, the sound of their joy filling the yard. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. The laughter was still a little tentative, still a little hesitant, but it was real. And that was enough. I thought about the days to come, the changes that were inevitable. There would be difficult conversations ahead, moments when the weight of the past would threaten to pull us under. But there would also be moments like this, small moments of connection, of understanding, of hope. And maybe that was the best we could do. Maybe the balance of new beginnings wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way to move forward with it, learning from it, and creating something new. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the future. The kids would continue to struggle, Sarah would continue to try, and I would continue to fight for a family that didn't look like it had before, but that was okay. Maybe this new version of our family wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a while, I wasn't afraid of it. Healing wasn't a straight line. If anything, it felt more like a series of hills and valleys, some steep and difficult to climb, others a gentle incline where the weight on my shoulders felt a little less heavy. But what I had learned was that healing required patience, patience with myself, patience with the kids, and patience with Sarah. It had been a few months since Sarah's return, and though there were still rough moments, things were slowly, steadily getting better. The kids had begun to open up more, even if their feelings were still messy and confusing. There were moments of laughter, moments of quiet understanding, and sometimes, like tonight, moments of shared vulnerability. The three of us were sitting around the dinner table, the scent of homemade spaghetti filling the kitchen. Aiden, who had grown taller over the past few months, was telling a story about school, his words stumbling over each other as he tried to get to the punchline. Lily was sitting next to him, her face lit up with that infectious smile of hers, the one that always reminded me that despite everything, life was still worth fighting for. As I watched them, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The road we had traveled was difficult, filled with sharp turns and unexpected detours, but here we were, together. Dad, Aiden said between bites, I'm thinking about trying out for the soccer team next year. What do you think? I raised an eyebrow. Soccer, huh? That's a big decision. You sure you want to give it a shot? Aiden shrugged, a mix of excitement and nervousness in his voice. Yeah, I've been practicing with some friends. I think I can do it. Plus, it'll keep me busy, right? I smiled, proud of him. I think you'll do great, Aiden. If that's what you want, I'll be there cheering you on. Lily jumped in, her eyes bright. I want to try out for something, too. Maybe a school play or a dance class. I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I chuckled, shaking my head. You're always coming up with something new, aren't you? She grinned. You have to keep it interesting, Dad. And in that moment, I realized how much I had missed these simple, everyday conversations. The kind that didn't involve painful discussions about the past, but instead focused on the future. The kind where we were just a family, no judgment, no guilt, no lingering scars. Just a dad and his kids trying to figure things out together. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, I found myself sitting on the couch, thinking about how far we had come. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Sarah had continued to show up, taking the kids to their extracurricular activities, making dinner on occasion, and just being present. I had to admit, it wasn't easy to let go of the hurt I'd felt when she walked out, but I was starting to see a new version of her, one that wasn't defined by her past mistakes. And the kids, especially Aiden, were slowly starting to accept her, piece by piece. It wasn't always easy. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, when they questioned whether they could trust her again. But there were also moments when I saw them embrace her, when they let their walls down and allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. I glanced at my phone, where I saw a text message from Sarah. It was simple, just a "Hey, how are the kids doing?" but it meant more than I expected. She was trying. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and that was enough for now. I sent her a quick reply, "They're doing great. Thanks for checking in. We're getting there." I leaned back against the couch, feeling the weight of the day finally lift from my shoulders. The kids were in their rooms, probably getting ready for bed. Sarah was doing her best, and I was doing mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had hope again. The next weekend, we made a plan to do something as a family, something simple, like a trip to the local park. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt significant. Sarah joined us, and for the first time in a while, we felt like a unit again. We packed a picnic, played a few rounds of catch, and just enjoyed the sunshine. No heavy conversations, no emotional walls, just us, existing in the same space, sharing laughter and quiet moments. Aiden and Lily seemed to relax, their tension from earlier in the week fading away as they played on the swings and ran around the grassy fields. I could see the way they looked at Sarah now, not with judgment or resentment, but with cautious hope. They were testing the waters, seeing if the family they'd once known could be rebuilt into something new. At one point, Aiden pulled me aside, looking a little hesitant. "Dad," he said quietly, I think I'm ready to give Mom another chance." I stopped, my heart momentarily caught in my throat. "What makes you say that, Aiden?" He shrugged, his face softening. "I don't know. She's been trying, and I can see that she wants to make things better. I don't know if everything's going to be perfect, but I think it's worth trying, right?" I felt a lump in my throat. The fact that he was willing to open his heart again, willing to trust again, was nothing short of a miracle. "You don't have to forgive her right away, Aiden. But I'm proud of you for giving her a chance. It's not always easy to do that." Aiden smiled faintly. "I know, but I want to try. For us." That night, after we had all returned home and settled in, I sat down on the couch, feeling a quiet sense of contentment. The kids were in bed, the house was peaceful, and for the first time in a while, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. Sarah texted me again. "I know things aren't perfect, but thank you for letting me be part of their lives again. I'm doing my best, and I hope they can see that." I thought about her words, feeling a mix of gratitude and guarded optimism. Things weren't perfect, and we weren't all healed yet. But we were trying. We were learning to forgive, to move forward, to find strength in each other. And that was a step in the right direction. The past was never going to be something we could erase, but together we could learn to live with it. Together we could build something stronger, something that wasn't defined by our mistakes, but by our willingness to heal together. And in that moment, I realized that maybe that's what family was all about, not perfection, but the willingness to try, to heal, to grow. It's strange how the most significant moments in life don't always come with fanfare or applause. Sometimes the most important changes happen in the quiet moments, those brief, unspoken exchanges, the shifts that aren't immediately obvious, but are felt deeply nonetheless. As I sat on the front porch that morning, the cool breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak tree in our yard, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. Aiden, Lily, and I had walked through a storm over the last few years, each of us trying to navigate the wreckage of our family in our own way. But somehow, here we were, still standing. Sarah had left a message on my phone earlier that morning. It was short, but there was a weight to it that I couldn't ignore. I'm proud of you. Proud of us. We've come a long way. Her words lingered in my mind as I watched the kids running around the yard, their laughter ringing in the air. There was a lightness to them now that had been absent for so long. Aiden had his soccer gear on, preparing for practice. He had made the team, and though he didn't always show it, I could tell it was a huge victory for him, both in the sport and in himself. Lily, with her wild imagination, was preparing for her school play. Her excitement was contagious, and I couldn't help but feel proud of her, too. When I thought about the journey we had taken, it felt almost unreal. There had been so many moments I wasn't sure we would make it, so many times when I thought the weight of everything would break us. But we hadn't broken. We had bent, we had hurt, but we hadn't broken. It wasn't just me and the kids anymore. Sarah, though still finding her place, had become a part of our rhythm again. It hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't perfect, but I saw the effort she was putting in. She was learning, just like I was. And while the damage couldn't be undone, the cracks were slowly healing. The hardest part had been accepting that things wouldn't return to how they were before. The family we had once been complete and whole was gone. And that wasn't a bad thing. What we had now, the family we were building, was different, yes, but stronger in ways that I hadn't expected. Dad. Aiden's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He jogged up to me, sweaty and out of breath. I'm heading to practice. Will you be there? Of course, buddy. I wouldn't miss it for the world. He grinned, nodding in approval. Thanks. I think I'm ready for this. All of it. I nodded, understanding that statement wasn't just about soccer. It was about everything, about the struggles we had faced, about the hope he had finally found in himself and in us. As Aiden ran off to meet his team, Lily came bounding up to me, her face lit up with excitement. Dad, I got the lead role in the school play. I get to be the princess. I laughed, kneeling down to give her a hug. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it. Lily beamed, her joy filling the space around us. I knew you'd say that. You're my star, always, I said, holding her a little tighter before she dashed off to practice her lines. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace, real peace. I knew the future wasn't going to be without its challenges. There would be tough days, and we would still need to confront the pain and mistakes of the past. But we had something now that was worth fighting for. A family that was healing. A family that was finding its way back to one another. That afternoon, after soccer practice, Aiden sat next to me on the porch. He was tired, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the way he carried himself now. He wasn't the same boy I had seen just a year ago, angry and resentful. He was growing into someone I was proud of. Someone who had learned to let go of his bitterness and embrace the future. You know, Dad, Aiden started, I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About Mom, about us. I looked over at him, giving him my full attention. What are you thinking? Aiden paused, gathering his thoughts. I think I'm starting to understand why you didn't give up on us. Why you kept fighting for us, even when everything was falling apart. My chest tightened. Aiden didn't often open up like this. I didn't know if he fully realized how much that meant to me. It wasn't easy, kiddo. But I did it because I love you. And I never wanted to give up on the family we could be. Even when it didn't feel like it was possible, I knew I had to keep fighting for you and your sister. Aiden nodded slowly, his eyes far away, like he was processing everything. I get it now. I do. And I'm glad you fought. Because now I feel like we're starting to be okay. We're gonna be okay. And, just like that, I could breathe again. Aiden had said the words I hadn't dared to say out loud. He had seen the progress. He had felt it, too. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, I stood on the porch, watching the kids and Sarah talk in the yard. There was something almost surreal about it, this quiet sense of belonging that had evaded us for so long. But now we had found it. Slowly, piece by piece, I thought about the journey we had taken, the sacrifices, the pain, the heartbreak. But it had been worth it. We had come out the other side stronger. And now we had a chance to live a life that wasn't defined by our past, but by our willingness to grow, to forgive, and to move forward. In the end, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. It was about choosing love, even when it felt impossible. It was about finding the courage to take that final step forward, together. And that was the real victory. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?